My name is Charles Lincoln. I'll be presenting the fictional scenario regarding international tax policy for developed countries, specifically rotating around Nostrland, Terratonia, and Abertonia, which respectively represent the Netherlands, Britain, and Australia. Now, what we have over here is the tax facts have already been set out, so I'm going to jump in right away to tax policy implications. Now, the implications for Nostrland is that a Territorian citizen will invest in Nostrland, and Nostrland will invest in Terratonia. This means that Nostronian investors abroad will want to have tax exemptions for their active income, specifically dividends, that are coming in. Generally, in the past, Nostrland did not want to give lower PE thresholds because then developing countries will want to get these lower PE thresholds as well in their tax treaties, and this creates a bad tax policy. Oh dear. The Terratonia is the country that is Britain, and it'll be investing as well. Residents of Terratonia working in Nostrland will be confronted with the PE issue. The jurisdictional issues apply, and additional levies on resources could be given as well. Now, you have the onshore and offshore situation where Nostrland does not have the specialized technical know-how how to drill these things, and they need to import workforce, so to speak, from abroad to conduct these operations. However, Terratonia has a credit system, and that means it's more of a capital capital export type system. Abertonia has solved the lower PE threshold and has 12 months of the threshold for the PE, but applies to any exploration or exploitation equipment. It's a different threshold, but a substantial equipment test is in the country. The credit system also applies to Abertonia. The treaty allocation for outgoing investment income. So our main issue is treaty allocation for, they want to create new tax for territorial income, which is either profit-based or output-based. Profit-based once you become profitable, or output-based once it kicks in as soon as you extract the minerals. So, the jurisdictional issues involved a number of things. Also, what does Terratonia want to tax, and how does the continental shelf come into play? I'm going to present a scenario where we could solve both. But before we get into that, I want to provide one other addendum that might also be an issue. Now, if we're specifically dealing with the Netherlands and the UK, we ought to see how they're connected with each other. This would be a map highlighting both the UK and the Netherlands in separate colors. So if we look at the Sephora case from the European Court of Justice, the free movement of workers does not preclude legislation of a member state that grants workers who prior to employment in that member state resided in another member state a distance of 150 kilometers or more from its border a flat rate exemption of reimbursement of extraterritorial expense while not granting the exemption to incoming worker who resided less than that distance from the border, unless it systematically gives rise to net overcompensation in respect of extraterritoriality. Now, the extractive industries is important to know this life cycle, but I propose this could provide for people living beyond the 150 miles an exemption working in Nostrland if there was such an arrangement made. This could state that we could bring in people working nearby and they could be exempted on our level. Now, that might seem like they're not gaining taxation, but it might be a potential solution, especially if we look at the life cycle, which this would be an image of. The investors often seek to reduce their. The UN has stated in one of their reports concerning extractive industry taxation that investors have sought to reduce risks of project diversification in cooperation with other partners. Now, what this means is, given that we're in a civil law country, we're going to have joint ventures with the government. Now, the government could do this in two ways. Either it could issue out licenses and then just pass the license to somebody else to have the right to profit from the land, or go into a joint venture with the investors and bifurcate where you have investors that are domestic and investors that are foreign and subcontractors. You could avoid having to change the PE rules by having a bifurcated system where the joint venture includes investors both domestic and foreign, while also having the government aspect maintaining royalties coming in. And this also involves changing the definition of royalties. But before we get to that change of definition of royalties, the license holder is the person doing the exploration, right? The person having the right to do the exploration. It could become a domestic investor, but a foreign investor. Get the investors both as subcontractors and investors, etc., and so on. The PE would be taxed easier. It would be taxed abroad with a lower PE threshold. That is an option, but if we do that, then other treaties may have to change. But the UN also explains how if we actually involve a bifurcated system, it'll increase the threshold, and regardless if we change the threshold or not, that'll cause people to meet that threshold. PE continued. Possible changes to the PE status in other treaties. If the threshold is not reduced, there could be another way of formulating the PE, combining time periods rather than just one period. And then another potential solution would be to change the business profits in addition to the resource levy by stating, giving an exception to the 20% tax if they reach the threshold limit. Now, the resource levy does make sense because, as the UN has stated, the policy for extractive industries is that to have resource levies and those types of levies is because once they're extracted, once they're gone, once they've left the country, they're not coming back, and this really helps maintain licenses for the government. So the goal is to change the definition of royalties or income from the license holder to get the government into with a joint venture, and by changing the definition of royalties, one-time license agreements with governments to a joint venture with the government, splitting jurisdictional issues but through the subcontractors. And that's my presentation.